What's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Siskind. I am the author of this fantastic book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And today I want to talk with you about building rhythmic vocabulary. This is not a sexy topic, so it's probably not going to do well on YouTube, but it's a really important one because I encounter so many students who know the correct scales. They know in theory, I think, kind of what jazz rhythm and swing articulation should sound like. But actually figuring out a way that they can incorporate it into their improvisation proves really difficult. So I have a strategy for you to practice building your rhythmic vocabulary, just like you would build your vocabulary of licks. You want to have a vocabulary of rhythms that you know that you can articulate correctly. So let's dive in. The first thing here, I love starting students with what I call the Perdido Rhythm. If you're not familiar with the song Perdido, it goes like this. So this Perdido rhythm is this little 3/8 note cell. And I love this rhythm because it's the shortest rhythm that we can have, which both starts and ends with an offbeat. Of course, it's not necessary for every single phrase in jazz to start and end with offbeats. But usually when I find that there's kind of an issue with somebody's jazz feel, one of the issues is that people tend to start and end too many phrases on downbeats. And if you do that, your phrasing is going to end up sounding a little bit square. It's going to end up kind of just being too on the beat. So this Perdido rhythm is a great place to start in terms of navigating, making sure that things come off the beat. As you're practicing this rhythm, what I would probably do is I would start with just a drone exercise. And I would just repeatedly play this rhythm. And you could practice leaving different amounts of space in between this rhythm. So I can start playing it once every 4 measures. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2. Okay, that's probably pretty boring to watch, so I'm gonna keep it to that much. Now, before I demonstrate what to do, if you're playing it every 2 measures or every 1 measure, let's take the time and think about, first of all, how we're going to articulate this rhythm. And then secondly, what kinds of shapes we can create using just a 3-note phrase. So first of all, articulation. First thing, I would play all 3 notes legato. No space, no silence in between. Second of all, and this is the hardest for most people, is that you want to de-emphasize the downbeat note. So you want the 2 offbeat notes to get more emphasis. So it's not. That's what a lot of people's tendency is, because we're used to emphasizing the downbeat. So instead, that downbeat note is going to be de-emphasized. And then lastly, we want to have a nice percussive short staccato accent on the last note. So emphasized, de-emphasized, emphasis with staccato, and no space between any of the 3 notes. Now, while we're doing this, we can think about simple shapes, or we can go to more complex shapes. For simple shapes, I would think about going directly up or down by step. For more complex shapes, we might want to change direction or leap within the 3 notes. So it could be kind of fun. Or we could change direction. We can make, for example, a V shape. We could do an upside down V shape. I don't know what you would call that. There's probably some Greek letter. So it could be 2 leaps, it could be 1 leap, but you want to practice just having an absolute mastery of this rhythm. So let's see what it would sound like if I did this once every 2 bars. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. you could practice it once every measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. So practice that until you master it. And then you could take this same 3/8 note unit and you could displace it onto different beats. Oh, that jumped on me. Sorry about that. So here you can see in the first example, it's that same 3/8 note rhythm, but it's starting on the end of 1. So now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 4, 1. And before we move on to these next rhythms, I would practice our very first rhythm with this new displaced rhythm. We're going to alternate every 2 bars. 1, 2, 3, original. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's our new rhythm. Our original. 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right, so now we're getting this deep in, and now we can tackle our next rhythm, which is the same thing, starting on the end of 2. By the way, the articulation doesn't change because it's based on where there's offbeats and downbeats. So whether we're starting on the end of 4, on the end of 1, or on the end of 2, the articulation will remain the same. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so this word displacement just means starting the same phrase on different beats. And then the last kind of possibility for displacement here would be starting on the end of 3. It's going to sound very similar. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And I practice cycling through all 4 of these. And notice so far I'm doing it all just on a C major vamp, so I'm not thinking about chord tones, substitutions, fancy enclosures, anything like that. I'm just trying to master these rhythms. So now I'm going to cycle through. So once on the end of 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, end of 1, and 1. End of 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so I'm going to cycle through. And then at that point, if you'd like to put it on a tune, you can then go ahead and put it on tune. So I'll do Autumn Leaves just to get in your ear. So now I'm going to cycle through 1, 2, end of 4, and now end of 1, now end of 2, end of 3, 2, 3, end of 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you got to have a couple things going on in your head at the same time. From there, right, we said that was probably the easiest, or at least the shortest phrase that we could have starting and ending with an offbeat. From there, we can start extending the phrase out, and we could have 5/8 notes. So now we're still starting and ending on an offbeat, but it's a slightly longer phrase. I don't have a good name for this one like I do for the Perdido phrase. If anybody has a good name suggestion, feel free to let me know. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Vadu, vadu, de. And again, you want to end this with a nice staccato. Putting emphasis on the offbeats. So use this as an opportunity to really dial in your jazz articulation. Right? And then we can start displacing this phrase. So instead of starting on the end of 4, we can start it on the end of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. let's alternate between starting on the end of 4 and the end of 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we could go started on the end of 2. 1, 2, 3. And so this actually gets slightly interesting here. And let me show you why. Because here, this last note especially wants to lead into the next chord. So here, it almost becomes pickups into the next measure rather than in our current measure. So it's like 1, 2, leading, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that ending is going to be kind of a push-off. And actually, because that's so interesting, I'm going to quickly write out for you what it would be like if we started on the end of 3. Because now we're going to kind of bleed into the next measure. It's going to be almost half and half. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3. And this would be a really great one for some people to practice, because I do find students who frequently kind of take a break right at the measure line. And this really goes over that measure line. So if you're somebody who knows that you have trouble getting into a flow from one measure to the next, practice this end of 3. Ba-do-va-do-va. 1, 2, 3. Ba-do-va-do-va. And I'm sorry, I just put a little accent as I was demonstrating on the downbeat to show where the downbeat is, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to accent the downbeat. 1, 2, 3. All right, so once you have that 3 and 5 note, 8th note phrases feeling pretty comfortable, then you can start putting in other rhythms. So you can use this similar kind of rhythmic framework and still starting and ending on an offbeat. And actually, all of these phrases kind of end in the same place. Well, that's not true. The middle one ends a little bit later. But now I'm putting in some quarter notes to mix it up. So the important thing to remember with quarter notes is we want them to be long but not connected. And we need to make sure they don't rush. Quarter notes have a tendency to rush. So as you practice these, you want to be really conscientious of getting a good time feel. I played that incorrectly. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the first example. All the way to the left. 2, 2, 2. And notice how I have just a little bit of space. It's not. We don't want to hear that really legato phrase. You want. But we also don't want it super staccato. That's not very typical of jazz. We call our quarter notes fat sometimes. You just want to sit down on each of those quarter notes. And sometimes people ask me, okay, so offbeat 8th notes are accented. Non-offbeat 8th notes are de-emphasized. What about quarter notes? And I'd say quarter notes can kind of be right in the middle. They don't need to receive a particular accent. They don't need to be particularly de-emphasized. Once you feel good about that, we can add 2 quarter notes into this phrase. Notice that the ending of the phrase is always kind of 2 8th notes. You're pushing off do-de. It's my favorite phrase ending in jazz. Or instead of a quarter note, we could put in 3 8th note triplets. So it's still the same rhythmic framework. We're just putting in a little bit of a variation instead of having all 8th notes. I didn't demonstrate the displacement with these, but I think by this point you can figure out how to displace it. So instead of starting on the end of 4, take that exact same rhythmic pattern and start it on the end of 1. So for this first one, instead of it could be 1, right? And then 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. possibilities, even within this pretty limited framework. And then you could even try starting your phrase with a quarter note. Oh, my iPad's not cooperating, so give me just a second. There we go. You could start the phrase with a quarter note. So instead of having an eighth note pickup, oh, it's not going to do it for me. It's being really difficult. But just work with me here. So I'll tell you what, I'll do this in real time for you. So instead of starting with this eighth note pickup, we could start with a quarter note pickup. It's more important where the phrase ends than where it begins, although we do like to start phrases on offbeat. So it's 1, 2, 3, and same thing when we have 2 quarter notes in a row, dot, dot. If we play this like, it doesn't really have that sense of rhythm, right? Or all right. So that's it for today. Buy my book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. The best place to buy it is my website, jeremysiskind.com. But just to review, you want to practice conscientiously coming up with great rhythms to improvise. And the place to start is starting and ending your phrases on offbeats. Then you can displace those simple phrases, 3 or 5 eighth notes, and have them start on each of the different beats. Then you can replace some of the eighth notes with quarter notes or with eighth note triplets. So I hope that helps you as you try to figure out your rhythmic approach. And subscribe, like, comment. I'll see you around.